Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is my very good friend Tony Gold. This is another episode of Cottage Talk. It's an interesting one. It is a silly season update, but we're really not going to be talking too much about transfer speculation. Instead, we're going to be calling it rinse and repeat. And what I mean by that, will Fulham's transfer window be the same as it has been for several years? Will it be the same? Will it be different? Tony and I will discuss throughout this show. After that, we're going to go through and discuss all the Fulham players with the question, who should stay and who should go? That's where things are going to get interesting, going through all of the players. That should be fun. All right, Tony, how you doing? It's been a while. What's going on?
It has been a while. Yeah, very good, Russ. Thanks. Yeah, looking forward to doing this. And let's see how we get on. Hi, Chris. Good evening. All good.
Yep, Chris is with us, so we already have our friend Chris. He's with us, so that should be good. All right, my friend, let's get going with the show, and let's start here. So, like I said, this is going to be about talking about the transfer window in general. And I was actually asked on Fulhamish, and I was asked also by a Fulham supporter, what makes Cottage Talk different than the other podcasts? I said, all the other podcasts have something to offer. We all do it a little bit differently. This is a show that I think epitomizes what we do on Cottage Talk. We look at issues, we talk about them, and we debate them. And I always say, I bring the Boston to Cottage Talk. You know, it's a type of show that I would see normally here. We're bringing it to everyone. So, Tony, the reason why I put on rinse and repeat is that I think it's pretty obvious that Fulham's transfer windows for many years has been the same. They leave it late. They're looking for the best deal that they can to get the player that they want at the price they want. So the way I'm looking at it right now, I do believe it might be rinse and repeat. Okay. What are your thoughts about it? Do you think we'll have the same?
Yeah, it's always an interesting time of year. You know, look, I personally, I don't think much is going to change, Russ, in terms of the way that the club, the owners, the manager, you know, approach the transfer market. We've been linked with every single Tom, Dick and Harry out there as usual. But in my mind, Silva has to have a clear plan. He has to have a clear plan of players that he's identified in the last, 3 or 4 months. He would have known towards the end of the back end of the season where he was short, where he needs to improve, the players that we need to get in. And, you know, they've got to start getting those conversations in early. They've got to start the ball rolling and getting into players now, because, you know, we don't want to get to, you know, the 1st of August and still not have anyone through the door. So, look, we'll see what happens in the next sort of couple of weeks, because I think obviously everyone's on a sort of a break now and sort of winding down from it all. And but it gets going very quickly, and ultimately, I think that, you know, most of the supporters know what this club needs, know the players that we need to bring in. It's just whether or not we've got the bargaining tools to get that, you know, those deals and those players in the door.
Okay, that's a good place to start, Tony. So do you put this more on Fulham's reputation of getting players in, meaning that they need to target a certain player? They're going after target 1, target 2, and target 3 when they don't get the first target. Do you think it's a financial situation, or do you think it is because they're Fulham and say they're not Liverpool? Obviously, Chris is watching. They're not going to be Liverpool, but if they want a certain player, I've always been one, and I've noticed it here where I live. When one of my teams has basically a time where they're building their team and they've had a bad season, they go all in at the beginning of the following season. That's just what they do. They go all in. Early, they go all in. The New England Patriots just did that. They've been criticized for not doing that. But this year they did because of the pressure by the fans, I think, that knew that they needed to get players in early. So why do you think they don't get players in so early?
I think, look, you got to remember where Fulham are in the hierarchy of the Premier League. And one of the biggest issues for us is that, good players that have got anything about them, players that want to, move on and get themselves those big deals, they want to be playing in Europe, Russ. Ultimately, every player wants to be playing in Europe. And we can't offer players that opportunity. We just can't. So you're already up against it in terms of, already this season, what you've got: Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, Newcastle. They'll all be playing in Europe. And, if they go after players and, we want to compete with them and try and get those players through the door, they've already got, the golden sort of ticket, if you like, because they can say, right, well, there's Champions League football, there's Europa League football, there's conference football. And what are Fulham offering? A rooftop terrace with a swimming pool that people can go and swim in after the game. So, no, just joke. But look, I mean, ultimately, it's, I think that's one of the biggest issues for us. I don't think it's...
We don't have Europe.
So, no, exactly. And I think that is a big indicator in terms of, getting players that want to play in the door.
Okay, so I know that is an issue, but I want to share this from Suhail because I think he brings up a good point. I think they're looking for a bargain, and we have to wait until other teams blink on price. I think that's a factor here too, Tony.
Yeah, bargains are... Yeah, I mean, I get his point, actually, and it's a good one. But look, there were no bargains last season. I mean, we paid 30 million quid for Anderson and over 30 million for Smith Rowe. So, Fulham have got the money, available if they need it. And also, we've got one of the wealthiest chairmen in the Premier League. I know we were having this discussion a while back. Shahid Khan is a very, very wealthy man. I'm not saying that means anything or not, but ultimately,
right.
If there's a player available and there is some interest, then you know what? We have to look, the bottom line is we have to improve on what we've got. And I know we're going to talk about it as we go on, but there are certain areas of our team that need to be addressed. And we need to start bringing in players that can, fill those gaps and improve us as a collective, but also bring out the best in the youngsters that are coming through, but also the current, group of players that we've got that can start pushing those players on to give, better performances.
Okay. That's all good stuff, Tony. And listen, to your point, I'm going to give you a couple of examples where I wouldn't say waited too long. In one case, I don't think they waited long at all. Paulina, a couple of seasons ago, they went after him hard and they got him in. I wouldn't say early, but they got him in fairly quickly as they could. I will say that they worked the Smith Rowe situation pretty well. They got him in. And they do spend money, as you talked about with Anderson. I guess for me, I would like to see them be more aggressive early and get the players in early. I don't like waiting until the end of the transfer window to fill out your team, Tony. I think that's a big problem I have, is that I want them pretty much ready to go by the beginning of the season.
Yeah, 100%. And look, with the thing with Paulina is that, yes, they did identify him early, that they got into him. He marked a lot of cards in terms of, where we were, what Silva needed. There's been a lot of talk about, bringing him back and that he might be available. And ultimately, look, he won't be the same Paulina that left us, Russ. That's the thing. Right. He's going to be a year older. He hasn't played a lot of football, but he's certainly a player that would come in, knows the club very well, knows Silva, knows what's wanted. And I think once he gets fitness, his sharpness back, and Silva gets him in, we know what he can do. And actually, that might change the dynamic again for us in terms of playing on the front foot and being more offensive. So, right. Look, I mean, it's going to be very, very interesting. I really hope that we don't drag our heels. I really hope that it isn't rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And actually, in the next sort of, as I say, week or so, that we do start to see some proper action, but not just signing players willy-nilly and, players that we've never heard of and all that kind of stuff. We need to bring in established, good, top quality players that are going to add or bring something different to this group that we haven't got or that we haven't seen in a while.
And I think that's important, Tony. I know here I am talking about, I don't want to see rinse and repeat. And part of that also has to do with the quality of players that they bring in. I understand why in past 3 seasons, they brought in what I would consider Premier League ready players because they played in the Premier League. They tend to be a little bit older. But you and I have talked about this. I want to see a different transfer window. I want it to be early, but if it's not going to be early, I would like to see it be younger. I want to see players that give Fulham something that they absolutely need, Tony, and then add to the team. I don't just want to see a player for the sake of bringing in a player that is just going to be a piece. They need more than just a piece, Tony. They need impact players, and they need a good amount of them. I'm talking about 5 or 6. You need to fill out your squad, but I could argue you can do that with the youngsters too. So they need impact players, and they need to get it right because, as we're talking about, they're limited to the players they can go after, as we've already been talking about, because of Europe, right? They don't have that to offer. But the thing is, they can offer a decent amount of money, and they should be finding the players that would suit the way Marco plays. But I want them to be younger, Tony. I think that's also an issue that I have.
Yeah, it's, you know what the key is, Russ? It's about balance. We've got to get the balance right. And sometimes you can be, overcompensate in one area and not have enough quality in another. And I think, absolutely right. We do need to bring the squad of, the age of the squad down. But you've got to remember also, we're sitting on 2, 3, 4 really good youngsters that we didn't see, enough of, in my opinion, last season. Josh King, Osman, De Figueroa's. Yeah, absolutely. And we're on the verge of losing another, really good youngster that we've invested a lot of time and energy in because for some reason, for whatever, and only, Marco Silva and his coaching team and the owners will understand it.
Yep.
And one of my bugbears is that we run this incredible academy with some really good coaches that do a great job, who are working really hard to develop and improve these players. And we're not using them. We're not bringing them through. We're not giving them the opportunity. And like I said last season, right? And Kamal and Suhail are gonna hate me for saying this, but and it's not a comparison in terms of position, but is someone like Josh King going to do any worse than Joachim Andersen, or any worse than Pereira, or any worse? No, the answer is no, he's not. He might not have the experience. He's going to make mistakes. But how do these kids learn if they don't get the opportunity to develop at that level?
I totally agree, Tony. It's funny. Like I said, we're going to be going through all the players, and one that actually has improved over his course of time and is still considered a young player is Calvin Bassey, Fulham's player of the season. He's developed, and now you're going to hear talk of other clubs interested in him. And I've already seen it, and the answer is absolutely no. You don't bring in Calvin Bassey to sell him. So we'll talk about that when we talk about Calvin Bassey. But they need to give these players, the younger players, that avenue that they know that they're not just going to be training with a team. See, I think they dangle that carrot. They let them train with the first team, Tony, but they don't actually let them play. And that goes down to Marco and his staff. And I understand, I've heard the reason that they're protecting these young kids, but at some point, Tony, as we would say over here, if you're in a pool, sometimes you just have to go throw them in the deep end of the water and see if they can swim.
Absolutely. But also you've got to have the opportunity to mix it up a bit. And actually, I'm all for players going out on loan and stuff like that. But honestly, where do homegrown players learn best? In the environment that they've been brought up in. And I'm sorry, but I one area that Marco Silva really needs to work on, moving into next season is giving young, hungry, good technical players more opportunity to be involved in the first team. And, we saw enough of Josh King even though we didn't see enough of him, in my opinion, but
And
we
he's
did
playing
see
for
enough
England
of him.
right now, Josh King,
Yeah,
by the way.
Absolutely, 100%. And, but there are youngsters, look at Arsenal, for example. Skelly, he's playing in the national team now, and he's been playing for Arsenal all season, and he's young, but we just don't seem to want to push these. And I think it's a bit of not being brave enough, having a bit of fear, the fear factor of what happens if we play these, players and I don't get results. Managers are then under pressure because suddenly now, you're looking at, oh, well, he's playing too many youngsters and they're not up to it. But again, that is the sort of line a manager walks, right? He's got to get the balance right. And I just don't think that balance is right, is there at the moment, Russ.
I totally agree, Tony. And listen, we're talking about rinse and repeat for the transfer window. I think that also holds true for the youngsters, meaning, is it going to be rinse and repeat and they don't have that pathway? At some point, like I said, we've got these players. I saw Luke DeFigueros and Devin Tanton 2 years ago in Philadelphia, and they looked at that point that they were on their way to be able to be Premier League players. I still think definitely DeFigueros. I think the jury's more out on Tanton, but he also got hurt last season. These are players that I think need a chance to play. Let them swim in the deep end. Give them a chance to play. That's the only way you're going to know. And it's funny because we've seen the comments from our friend Chris, who's a Liverpool supporter. Look at his club. They have all this money and they are implementing the young players. So yes, Chris, I'm going to give Liverpool some credit because I think they're doing it right, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely spot on, Russ. I mean, you've articulated it, brilliantly. And there's some great comments coming. I can't keep up with all the comments that are coming in, but there's some great comments coming in from everybody. And you know what? It's,
keep them coming.
Absolutely keep them coming. And hello, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I can't keep up with them, but I can see a few comments coming in left, right, and centre. But yeah, look, I think ultimately, Soho made a comment about DeFigueros, a season and a half ago.
Yeah,
we haven't seen him at all this season. And I know he's been injured and so on and so forth. But, someone that is as young as him and is composed as him and has a really good football brain, he's someone that you've got to start encouraging coming into our back four and getting in there, because one of our weak spots, one of our Achilles heel last season was the fact that we were unable to keep clean sheets, Russ, and we gave away some appalling goals game after game after game. And in the end, it proved costly. Everyone can talk about individuals and talk about this and, oh, well, we threw away 28 points from winning positions and blah, 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 blah. We just didn't defend well enough. That's the bottom line. We weren't good enough defensively. And that is an area that Silva must address. Not should, must. Absolutely, categorically must address this season. Otherwise, it's going to be repeat.
Right. And that's what we don't want to see. That's why we're starting the show by talking about this. There are so many ways to look at rinse and repeat. Like I said, we're talking about the transfer window. When are you going to do your business? But it's also going to be the way Silva runs his team this season. They're in this position, Tony, where we'll call it, and I don't like the term, but they are comfortably mid-table. It's mid-table mediocrity. They are comfortable now in the transfer window. But if they stand still, Tony, they will get into a relegation battle and possibly get relegated. So you have to continually build. And that, to me, means that you should be looking at the way you do business and think about, how can I do it better? That's kind of where I'm going on the rinse and repeat, Tony. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But, we've moved forward now. The season's over. Now, every team is virtually in transition in terms of, either bringing in a new manager, new coaching teams, new players, etc., etc., etc. I think the Premier League is going to be one of the most competitive Premier Leagues in its history next season. I really do. And I think that, Tottenham and Man U will not be as bad as they were, last season. That's what's 100%. We don't know what's coming in to Brentford, but, you can imagine that they're going to be very, very clear about, who they're going to bring in and what that looks like. The three teams that are coming up will be competitive. So it's going to be tough, and we have to get our house in order in that regard, in terms of players, the depth that we need, the quality that we need, the areas that we need to improve on. all of those things need to be addressed and they need to be sorted.
Okay, very good. Here's an interesting comment from Suhail before we move on to the second part of the show. We also need to make a statement by extending contracts earlier for big money. Let other teams know we mean business. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, still, a few players outstanding, which, they should have been tied up and done a long time ago. And I don't know why they're waiting and what the issue is. But again, why do we take so long to get things sorted out?
Right.
And it's frustrating. But he's absolutely right.
Yep.
It does make a statement. It shows that you want the players that are there, and we've got to kick on quickly.
I'll give you one that actually really stands out. Okay, that they need to do something ASAP, and I'm surprised that nothing has been done before. Who knows? It could be the player, it could be the team. I don't know. Rodrigo Muniz is on such low money, Tony. They need to do something for him. They absolutely need to renegotiate that. He is on such low money that obviously there are other clubs that are going to come in because they see the opportunity. That's, I think, possibly where Suhail is going on.
Well, I think what clubs have identified is they've seen the potential that he's got, and as Kamel says there, it's crucial that we get that done because, he's come on leaps and bounds.
Yeah,
he's come on leaps and bounds this season, and he's one that you really, really don't want to lose because, he's nowhere near the finished article, and I think he's only going to get stronger, going to get better. And if we can bring in another really good centre forward, then that's only going to help him.
Exactly. Good stuff. All right, please keep the comments coming. So now we're going to switch to the second part of the show, which I think is going to be interesting. Like I said, we're not really getting into transfer speculation per se on this episode. I know I called it the silly season update, but I wanted it to set up our talk about it's still the silly season. So we're going to discuss now who should stay and who should go. So we're doing this in tandem with two players at a time. So Tony and I are going to discuss both of the players at the same time. We'll share if we want the player to stay and if we want the player to go. So this should be fun, Tony. Let's get to it. Let's start with the goalkeepers. So we can do them individually or together. Let's start with Bernd Leno and Steven Benda. I think it's pretty obvious we want Bernd Leno to stay and should do everything in our possible to keep him happy because he's that good of a goalkeeper. However, Steven Benda is a different type of kettle of fish, as we would say here. Thoughts on Bernd Leno and Steven Benda to get us started with who should stay and who should go?
Well, obviously, my player of the season, Bernd Leno. I mean, we cannot afford to lose him under any circumstances. And like Chris says, lifetime contract.
Lifetime contract. I agree.
Done
with
and
that.
Dusted. Yeah. I mean, he's outstanding. And I'm a big fan of his. Obviously, the worry is, and obviously he's had a great season. He's pretty much played every game and he's kept himself fit and healthy. The worry is, Russ, is there's always this thing in the back of your mind, if he gets injured, what happens if he gets injured? Steven Benda is no Premier League, goalkeeper at the end of the day, in my opinion. Well, not good enough over a period of, 9, 10, 11, 12 sort of games. So yes, that is an area that I think we would need to strengthen, but it's very difficult to get a backup goalkeeper that's that's happy to play number 2 and just sit on the bench all season, which is obviously why we've got Steven Benda, because he's happy to do that. So I mean, he's not ideal. He can come in, he can do a job to a degree, but is he a long-term answer if Leno were to get injured? No, and we would definitely have to go into the market, in my opinion, to bring in somebody, far better, far more established.
Right. And I agree with all that, Tony. I'll just add the caveat. Nothing against Steven Benda. Obviously, Bernd Leno, I agree with Chris's comments. But on Benda, I think you can get away with it in some of the cup competitions. We've seen that already, right? But if anything happens to Leno, you're in trouble. You are seriously in trouble. Steven Benda is not ready for the Premier League. Let's just call it what it is. He's not ready. And I've seen speculation that they're going to look for a backup goalkeeper, and they really should, Tony. So I think you and I are completely in agreement there. All right, let's move on. Let's now talk about
Julian would rather put Diop in goal than Bender.
Oh, did he? Did I miss that? Did I do a Goldman? Did I miss that?
He's
Oh, okay.
got a point.
There you go. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Kenny Tete and Castagna.
Yeah, so obviously the transfer rumours have been flying around about bringing in Bellanova, is it?
Yep.
From so there's been talk about that, which kind of makes me think that maybe Timothy Castagna not happy about maybe being a backup next season and might be looking to move on. I would definitely keep Kenny Tete 100% because obviously he missed a lot, big parts of the season. And I think has done, very well in that position. I think Castagna is a good backup. I think he struggled this year. At times in games, he was a little bit off the pace, but maybe that time has come where, he's got to move on and we have to bring in, somebody fresh in that position.
Okay, so the way I'm looking at it, and listen, you and I had said this several times last summer. We wanted Castagna to be the starting right back, and Tete won the job, and he deserved it. He was fantastic. But here's the situation with both of them. The situation with Tete is I don't feel strongly that he's going to stay, or he would have signed an agreement. So I think they're doing the right thing by looking at other options. So for me, it's all going to matter on, does Tete want to stay? I want them both to stay. I'd be happy with them both being there, but you make a very good argument, Tony. At some point, you need to bring in a fresh player. So if one stays, then maybe one should go. Maybe that's kind of where I'm going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, having a good backup is important. Now, I don't know too much about Bellanova, but the word is that he's very accomplished, he's very good, he's very strong, and he'll bring something different. So look, ultimately, if Tete does go and we end up keeping Castagna, then we definitely have to bring in a stronger right back and somebody that's going to come in and give us that strength there. But yeah, again, the uncertainty is around the fact that at the moment, there's no news and it's gone very quiet, and that makes you worry a little bit.
Yeah, it does. That's why I think that might be why we're seeing the speculation. They're basically protecting themselves by looking at other right backs, as they should, Tony, as they should. But we'll see what happens. I actually do hope Tete signs a new deal. But on the flip side, I see your point about bringing in a new right back. That's not such a terrible situation. All right, this one's going to be interesting. Joachim Anderson and Calvin Bassey, Tony. I'll get us started. If you're asking me, first of all, Calvin Bassey's a player that I'm going to put him in a category, and I'm going to be saying this about several of the players. Build around. You build around Calvin Bassey. He's a player that's part of your core. I'm going to put him there, so he stays. Joachim Anderson, if you could get a taker, he goes. I'm going to say it right now. They need to upgrade at this situation. If they're not going to bring in another center back, I want Luke de Figueroa to get a shot at that position, Tony. If you're asking me, I would like to see them try to move on from Anderson. I don't think they're going to be able to. What are your thoughts about both these players?
It's a difficult one because I think that they haven't really complemented that each other that brilliantly this season. I think Bassey, obviously, you want to keep. I think that he's had a very strong season. The player of the season, and rightly so. He's been full of energy. Has carried the ball really well out of the back, defended very well at times. My issue is around Anderson, and again, I know there's a few people listening in here that rate him and do think that he's worthy of his place. But my issue around him is, and put aside what we paid for him, okay? Because at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. It's how it's the qualities that they bring and what they offer in terms of how we play. Anderson is a yard off the pace from what you need in a Premier League centre back, and I think he struggled because of that lack of pace. The strikers have got quicker, they've got fitter, they've got stronger, and he really struggled in those areas. And I think ultimately we had Cuenca this season, who we completely underused. Diop, unfortunately, didn't know whether he was coming or going. He did well when he came in, and then suddenly he was out and whatever. So my argument is, Russ, if we can find a stronger, better, quicker, more reliable centre half, then I would bring them in, and I would say to Anderson, listen, you got to get yourself fit and sharp, as Suhail just said there, and give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's see if he hits the ground running. But if not, then it needs to be addressed, because I honestly believe he was one of the major reasons why we struggled defensively in terms of keeping clean sheets last season.
Okay. Do you put any stock that the injury changed his season?
Yeah, look, injuries affect players in different ways. Absolutely. Players get sharp and fit, and match sharpness, comes by playing. And if that's interrupted or, broken by someone getting an injury and putting them out for a while, sometimes it can be difficult to get that form back and find that rhythm, as we saw with Smith Rowe. But I don't think you can use that as an excuse because of the area that he plays. Playing centre half is one of the easiest positions on the pitch, in my opinion. Your job is very simple. You know what you have to do. Don't overplay, win your headers, win your tackles, cover round, got to read the game and distribute the ball, well. Did he do that? Did he do that well enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, do you know what? I hope he's right. I really do. I will buy him if Anderson plays the way that he thinks he will, trust me, I'll see him in the Hammersmith end and I'll buy him a pint after the game. And after the season, I'll say, you know what, you were right. And I want to be wrong. I do want to be wrong, Russ. 100%.
No, so do I. And listen, I want to say this. The reason why I brought that up is that I was a big proponent of bringing in Joachim Andersen. So I would love for him to prove me wrong. I want him to play well. That's why I asked the situation with the injury. Is it injury related and he just never recovered? I'd like to believe that because I liked him when we first had him. So I do want it to work out. So I'm with you on that. But I'm also trying to think of the situation with Fulham. If they could find someone that is of better use to them, then you go for it. That is nothing really to do about Anderson. I just want someone that plays at a high level in that position. That's where I'm going on that. Okay, so Kamal asked me, why do I like Luke so much? So as Kamal, your brother, mentioned, we both saw him in Philadelphia. I saw him play a few more times during the Premier League Summer Series. I've also seen him play internationally. I'm telling you, he has never shown me even an iota that he doesn't belong. He looks like he belongs. He looks so assured on the ball. As someone described watching this weekend, he looked like a young Tim Ream. Kamal, is that good enough for you? So that's kind of where I'm going on that. All right. Let's move on. It's funny because people are asking. I saw someone ask about Diop. We're going to talk about it now. Let's talk about Jorge Cuenca and Issa Diop. This is interesting, okay? Like I said, I've already thrown Luke de Figueroa into the mix. We're not going to really talk about him, but let's talk about these two players. I got to say, Cuenca has really not done much wrong, Tony. I'd like him to stay. There's already speculation of teams interested in him, and it makes sense, right? Issa Diop is, I don't know what happened there. What are your thoughts? Do you want these players to stay, or both go, or both stay, or one go and one stay?
Right. So for me, I keep Cuenca 100%. I think we haven't seen the best of him by any stretch. I think, as I said, I think he was underused.
You're smart man, Suhail, by the way. Go.
Yeah. he's a very good technical player. And I like that. And I think, you need to have good, composed defenders who are good on the ball. And I think he is that. And I think he's definitely got something to offer. I think Diop, unfortunately for me, Russ, look, he's okay as a squad player. I think, is he going to be happy being a bit part player again for another season? I'm not so sure. And I think he will be looking, if a club comes in for him and can offer him regular first team football, then if I'm Issa Diop, I'm taking it. I'm going because I want to play. I don't want to be a backup fill-in, sort of player. So for me, I think he will go if the right offer comes in. And that's an area that we have to strengthen 100%.
Okay. I want Cuenca to stay. I'm not against Diop, but I think if a situation comes up, it might be good for him to go. So I'm for both of them staying, but I certainly could understand if Diop left. All right, let's move on. This one's going to be interesting as well. Let's talk about Jedi and Ryan Sessegnon, okay? So let's preface this way. Should they stay and should they go? But also in the situation with Jedi, it's a little bit more complicated than that because he's going to have suitors. Now, Liverpool don't seem to be one of the suitors. Thank you, Chris. I'm glad that they're not going to be one of the suitors because that makes things a little bit easier. But even here in America, they are pushing Jedi to go to a Champions League side. He's going to be under pressure to leave. I'm telling you that right now. I've already seen it. So let's talk about Ryan Sessegnon and Jedi. I'll give you first crack because I've got some stuff I want to talk about in regards to Sessegnon.
So, Arne Slot woke up eventually and realised that, Robinson can't defend, so actually they're not interested, and they've pulled the plug on it. Look, I would cash in on him. I would definitely cash in on him, and actually it's gone very quiet, which makes me think. Obviously, he's injured and out at the moment, and he's out for a while and stuff like that. But yeah, look, I won't be surprised if there you go, and Suhail, agrees. But look, I think there will be a Champions League side, I believe, that will come in and will make an offer. What we get for him now is anybody's guess, really. It certainly won't be the 100 million that everyone was talking about just before Christmas. But look, whatever it is, I think, for me, I think we need to bring in a better left back defensively who can defend better. And I think that was one of his weaknesses, always has been. He had a purple patch at one point with all the assists and all that stuff. But that's not what I want. Personally, it's not what I want my left back doing. I want my left back defending, being solid and making sure that we don't concede goals. Ryan Sessegnon, unbelievable season for him to come back from where he was and
you said signing of the season.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And because of his age, Russ, I mean, we haven't even, scratched the surface in terms of how good he's going to get and how much more he's going to bring to the table. So we 100% keep him. Absolutely 100%.
Okay. All right. So now I'll share my thoughts on Sessegnon and Jedi. In regards to Jedi, I want to say I want him to stay, but if they're going to sell someone, because we're going to talk about some other players that I would rather them not sell, I would sell him if they're going to get an upgrade. They're kind of going where you're going on, Tony. If they're going to upgrade the position, fine. Better defender, fine. I'm for that. If not, then I'll keep Jedi because Jedi, you know what you're going to get with Jedi. He's going to offer you a lot. So I'm kind of a little bit both on that. I'm kind of in the middle on Jedi. Sessegnon definitely want to keep, and I'm going to say right now, I already mentioned Calvin Bassey, players to build around. Ryan Sessegnon is going to be one that I think is going to have a massive impact. He's entering his prime. I'm going to throw it out there right now. Today is June the 16th. He's going to be my player of the season. I'm going to say it right now. I expect big things from Ryan Sessegnon next season. I'm throwing it out there right now. I expect him to have a huge season. I think he is just ready to take off. He got a little taste back. He's now matured. He's now a man, Tony. Ryan Sessegnon, look out for next season.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you may well be right. I mean, ultimately, Marco Silva has to give him the opportunity to play. As Chris says, he needs to be a starter next season, and I'm sure with another pre-season behind him, and a bit more sharpness and a bit fitter, and obviously he's filling out physically, which is great.
Yep.
There's absolutely no reason why he is not a starter next season. I know certain fans prefer him, higher up the pitch. Yep. But I think he can do as good a job, if not better, at left back than Jedi. I really do believe that. I think he's a better footballer.
Would he be your starter, Tony? I hate to go there.
As a left back?
Yes. Would you rather have him as a left back or further up the pitch? Because I kind of would like him further up the pitch.
You see, I would change the shape slightly. So, me personally, I would love Silva to adapt to 3-5-2. I really would.
How did I know you were going to go there?
Because I think that for me, that with the players that we've got, that system would suit us so well. And with a couple of really good additions, I just can visualize it. I just see it.
Tony, it might actually help Anderson. It might actually help him.
Yeah, but Anderson's definitely better within a free. There's no question about it. No question at all. But I just, we know what Silva is. We know what he's going to do. And there's no way he would ever revert to that. So, it is what it is. But ultimately, for me, that's where I've been. But look, he can do a job in either position. Obviously, a lot more people prefer him further up the floor. And I think he's more effective when he's further up the pitch, if we're being honest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Coming up next, Tony and I will talk about the midfield and the strikers. All right, Tony, let's get to it. Let's talk about Berge and Lukic. This is interesting because both players, I think, had very good seasons. Some people thought Berge should be up for player this season. We did that with the Fulham Legends. I believe it was Rob Wilson who had Berge as his player of the season. So that's interesting. So let's talk about this. Do you want these players to stay or go?
Both of them to stay. But, look, they both had good seasons, yes, but it became too samely towards the end. And actually, this is an area of the park that Marco Silva needs to address. And, we need to start bringing in a bit more diversity into midfield. We need to start bringing in some creative midfielders that not only can create opportunities, but can also score goals. These two don't have any goals in them at all.
No, they do not.
Zero. And I think, again, that came back to bite us towards, the end of the season. I think there's certain games that they need to both play in. And then there's certain games where you just need one of them to play, not both. And again, sorry.
I was going to say, I think this is what we're talking about. I think Chris nailed it. We're talking about two holding midfielders for away games.
Yeah, and certain away games, definitely. And certain opposition, absolutely. Because, you do need that solidity in front of your back four, and those two can give it to you. But when you're at home, Russ, and I think this is an area that we've got to this is an area where you've got to address is we've got to be a lot more on the front foot at home in matches and be a bit braver. And take games to teams a lot more than we did, rather than sitting off and being more worried about what they're doing than what we're doing. And I think that focus has to shift.
Okay. So you will have them both staying. I would agree with you. I'll just leave one caveat. Okay, here it is. If they get Paulinho, one of them I think should go. If they got Paulinho. That's only if they got Paulinho, because I think then you can mix and match how you want to play, because you can play with one holding midfielder, Tony. I don't think you need both of them. What do you make of that? I'm just saying
it's a good point. But if Paulinho comes in, I'd still keep both, simply because because it gives you that squad depth for us, and it gives him options. Sander Berge is the one that misses out for me in terms of, he's a player that you bring off the bench if you need to, solidify things for the final 10, 15 minutes, and you need to be, strong and see games out. But yeah, look, he both of them would be better keeping them and upgrades on what we've got if Paulinho comes in through the door. So for me, I still stick with the fact that we keep them.
Okay. Kamal, you know the answer to this because you and I already talked about it. I agree with your brother. If Zhao comes, I would get rid of Lukic. I know you don't want to hear that, but yes. Okay. Wow. We already had that discussion. All right, let's move on. Let's now talk about, very interesting, these two players, okay? Harrison Reed and Tom Kearney. So there's speculation. There's been speculation with Reed and Kearney. Their age is a factor with both of them. So, Tony, I'll get us started. I'm going to say Harrison Reed. I think they need to move on from Harrison Reed. So I think that he should go find another team. Kearney's a little bit different because I still see how that they can get value for him, but it kind of goes against my thought process of getting younger, right? Moving on for certain players. I'm going to make a stance. I would get rid of Reed and keep Kearney.
Okay. Really, really tough one for me, Russ. Right. So Harrison Reed, time to move on. He we need to bring an upgrade.
Steve Reynolds and Chris are both saying that.
Yeah, we need to bring in an upgrade, and we need to bring in a younger, better, stronger player. Harrison Reed is a top-end championship player now, in my opinion. Should go and play in the championship and just go and enjoy himself. Might go back to Southampton. That would be a good move for him.
Yeah, that would be a bad idea.
Tom Kearney, absolute legend. Loved the man to pieces. Time for him to go.
Oh,
time for him to go. And I think with the deal that's out there, Wrexham, that seems to be something that's in the pipeline for him. He can play regularly, make a name for himself there, have a great season playing there. I just think that it's just come to its natural end. And actually, again, we need to bring in a younger, hungrier, quicker, stronger, just better player. Tom Kearney's been a legend, and he always will be. But we need to move on from those two now. Okay,
I have this issue with Wrexham, as people might know, just because I actually just watched Welcome to Wrexham the other day, and I watch all the episodes. They're so big over here, and it'll blow everyone's mind how big Wrexham is because of Welcome to Wrexham. They're huge, so I understand it. I think it would also be a good career move moving forward for Tom Kearney. But if I had my druthers, I'd want him to stay. That's just me. Okay. So I'm just sharing more comments. Sounds like I have to finally disagree with Tony. Tom is a legend.
Listen, I can understand that. I really do. I just, when you keep a player for too long and it gets to that point, has he got another season in him in the Premier League? Coming off the bench, will he still be able to add, like he does and like he has done this season? Yeah, maybe, possibly, because he's a fit guy. He can do it. But I just feel that, we need to freshen it up. And I just think that, at what point do you just make a decision and say, right, now's the time that we've got to make that, make that move. Okay, so I can understand where he's coming from 100%.
Okay, great. All right, Tony, I'm giving you two players that I think play the same position and at different times of their careers. This is going to be interesting when I put this on the screen. You ready for it? Here we go.
I'm ready.
Andres Pereira and Josh King. Okay, so I want to get your thoughts on Pereira. We've seen the speculation on him. Josh King's a young player. I think you're going to want him to stay. But I think they also need to give him a new deal. I think that needs to happen. What are your thoughts about Pereira and Josh King?
Well, Josh King is a no-brainer. I mean, get him on a 5-year, 6-year, 7-year contract, whatever you need to do. Get it signed, sealed, and delivered, and get him in the first-team squad next season. Play him regularly. Okay? As far as Pereira's concerned, tell me where he needs to be and what time, and I'll drive him there personally. And I won't charge him either.
I'll join you. We could do it together, Tony. We could do it together. I'm fine with getting rid of Andres Pereira. I'm done with Andres Pereira. I know others see the value in him. I've said it before. I do see some value in him. I just think it's time to move on, and I'll just leave it at that. I definitely think it's time to move on. So Hale says AP should go, get money for him. Now I agree with all that, and Steve Reynolds is on board as well. I do like the 10-year contract from Chris. I like that.
100%.
Whatever you can do with Josh King, it's more to do with Josh King than Andres Pereira. But
I think Kamel mentioned something about a wheelchair, Russ. I'll even take him up in a wheelchair wherever he wants to go. I'll wheel him there.
Love it.
Pereira has to go. I don't want to see him again. I just don't want to see that guy again in a Fulham shirt. Thank you.
Okay.
I couldn't handle it.
Okay. We're doing this player alone. Okay. Let's do it. Emil Smith-Rowe. Okay. This is an interesting one. Huge money signing. You and I have talked about this a lot, Tony. One, I want him to stay. I don't think they could sell him even if they wanted to, okay? But I want him to succeed in the worst possible manner. So he's a big has to stay for me, but I also want to see improvement from Emil Smith-Rowe. There's a lot on his shoulders this upcoming season. I want him to prove his value this upcoming season. Emil Smith-Rowe.
100% keep. Absolutely. Look, I feel sorry for this lad this season. I think he's had a really tough initiation into Fulham. We talked about him a lot this year, Russ. I've said to you many times, I think we will see a much better version of him next season. I really do. I think he'll have the pre-season. He's got through this season injury-free. I think he will work really hard on his fitness, his sharpness. I think that Silva needs to help him a little bit as well in terms of freeing him up a little bit more in the final third and not asking so much from him, from a defensive perspective. Because, where Emil Smith-Rowe is a real danger and can be really, really great for us is in pockets of space, in between the lines, in between the centre halves and the midfielders. That's where he can be lively. And I think if he's fitter and sharper, I think we see a completely different version of him next season. And I think he's going to, be the player that we all want him to be and hope that he can be.
Okay, excellent. All right, Tony, let's move on. Harry Wilson and Adama Traore, your thoughts?
Yep, keep both of them. 100%. Harry Wilson, he's in and around it. He's in the mix, and he's also got an argument to say that he should be starting and playing on a regular basis. But for me, he is that impact player that can come off the bench. He's shown it many times this season and done the job. But he's a great player to have. He's very versatile, can come on and do that. And Traore, I absolutely love. I know he's like Marmite.
I want to keep Traore. Definitely.
Some people hate him, but personally, he's that one player, Russ. You'd rather have him in your team than have him against you, right?
Totally.
Regardless of how inconsistent he is, I love him, and you never know what you're going to get. And I think we keep him.
He is the 100% Russ Goldman box of chocolates player. He is totally, you don't know what you're going to get with him. And Chris is right about it. Again, I wish his end product was better, but it is what it is at this point. That's not going to change. All right. Here are two players, Alex Iwobi and Reece Nelson. So I'm bringing Reece Nelson to the mix. I know he's going back to Arsenal, but there might be an opportunity to bring him back, Tony. So that's why I want to include him in this discussion.
Yeah.
Thoughts on both?
Yeah, Alex Iwobi we keep, but I think we've got to manage his playing time a lot better. I mean, we ran him into the ground, and then towards the end of the season, he had absolutely nothing left in his legs. He was completely gone. Yep. So he's had a great season, and good player, but we need to manage him better. Reece Nelson, I don't think we bring him back. I wouldn't bring him back. I just think there's too much of a risk there, Russ, with the injury. I think when he did play for us, he did okay. But I think there's better out there. I think there's better options. So I would be hesitant to go down that road with Nelson.
Okay. Iwobi stays. Nelson, if you're telling me the health was right, and the price was right, I would do it. But so that's the only way I would do it. But I understand why you wouldn't. I would, because I think he can offer you something. But maybe there's another winger that can offer you more at the right price too. So I'm kind of waffling on that. All right, let's move on. Okay, this is a strange combination, but Marshall Godot and Willian.
Well, Willian, no, definitely not. Done and dusted now. He needs to go and enjoy his retirement or go to the LA, American League and go and play somewhere over there and just enjoy it, or Saudi League, or whatever he's going to do. So that's an absolute no from me. I don't think, I think Godot is one of those players, Russ, that just isn't quite at the level. So personally, I would move him on, or at least get him out on loan somewhere, get him some game time, get him playing. whether that's top end Championship, bottom end Premier League, whatever it is. He needs to go and get some experience and needs to go and play. And we need to see, whether he is at the level and whether he has got it. I just don't think he is, but we'll wait and see.
Okay. I'm not sure about Godo. I'm again another player. I haven't seen enough. So this would be a situation if they feel that they need to send him on loan, I'd be all for that because I'm just don't know about him yet. So I'm kind of with you on that. All right. You ready for this one? I think this is an easy one. Carlos Vinicius.
Well, he's gone, isn't he? Anyway, I think so. That's
yeah, right.
Bye-bye.
Right.
And he should have gone. I mean,
he's gone anyways.
I don't understand the mentality of having him around last season when you got Osmond in the under 21s and not playing him is just one of life's mysteries. That anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, and we're gonna end with the two strikers, Raul and Rodrigo. So let's talk about both of them. I'll share my thoughts. Go ahead, Tony. I'll wait.
So my thoughts are to keep both, absolutely, but we still need to bring in the one area we need to bring in. We need to bring in an upgrade on both. We need to bring in a strong, prominent, quality centre forward. I know there's been talk about Duran coming back.
John Duran.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good move. And yeah, we 100% need to keep both, but definitely bring in an upgrade.
Okay. And that is really the big story, Tony. They need another option. They need, I want to say, a real quality option. Now, I'm going to say this because there's been speculation with this player. I'm not saying him specifically, but I've seen Ricardo Pepi play a good amount. I think he's a Premier League level player. Others probably don't. When you hear an American player, I understand the skepticism, but regardless, they need someone that can score goals on a regular basis. And I've seen Pepe score goals. But is there a type of striker you're looking for just in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, Chris has kindly offered Darwin Núñez to us, Russ. So let me know where we can sign on the dotted line and we'll get him in. I'd love to have Darwin Núñez at Fulham.
Yeah, they can't afford him. I hate to tell you, they can't afford him.
I would love to have him. But yeah, there is a certain centre forward that we need. And the centre forward that we need is the one that, that we don't have, that has pace, that can run in behind, that can get away from defenders, that can break into the box and finish and score, 15 to 20 goals a season, which is what we missed with Mitrovic, which we didn't replace.
Right.
That's what we need. We need a stronger, quicker, more direct centre forward, and we just don't have it. Núñez potentially could be that player, but you're taking a massive gamble by just keeping those two next season and not having another option. I think it's very risky. I really do. I don't know. I think next season, as I said, it's going to be a very competitive, very tough league, and it's going to be a big ask for Raul to go and hit double figures again next season. So yeah, definitely an area we need to strengthen.
Totally agree. I will keep both, but I want another striker. They need another striker. They need a striker, like you said. I agree with your thoughts on that, Tony. A striker with pace. All right, we are going to wrap up the show. The one thing I do want to mention, we've right now have a huge amount of people watching live. I would really appreciate this, so I'm actually going to share this. Could you please subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already? I would really appreciate that. We're really trying to push the YouTube channel. And also, when we go live, you'll get an alert. So please do subscribe on YouTube. Much appreciated if you would do that. All right, Tony, unbelievably, we did this in less than an hour. Overall thoughts on the show. Final thoughts.
Yeah, listen, unbelievable. Lovely to see all the people, listening in and
thank you, everyone.
Great comments and some, it's great. Love it. So yeah, looking forward to the pre-season and seeing what the club do and how they move forward. The excitement is there. So let's hope it's good stuff.
Great, Tony. Listen, this has been a great show. As I started the show, and I'll just mention for anyone that joined in late, I was asked when I did the show on Fulhamish, Fulham America, that they have their own show, what makes Cottage Talk different? And I said, well, all the podcasts that talk Fulham do it in a different manner. But I think what makes Cottage Talk different is typical of what we did here today. We debate, we talk about the subjects that fans care about, and we really go into it in a constructive manner. And every show has the way that they do it. They're all great shows. I listen to all the podcasts, but I thought this show really epitomizes what Cottage Talk's all about. So that's how I wanted to end the show. Tony, as always, thank you so much for doing the show with me. I enjoyed every minute of it. This is
brilliant.
Such a great show. Do have to wrap this up. For Tony Gold, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the TalkSport Fan Network.